And I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. And I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Благодарю.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, it's the first time since October last that the Council met in order to discuss the Resolution 2119 in person. And we're grateful to the Estonian presidency for that. It is yet one more step towards a return of Security Council to its traditional methods of work, and the time was ripe for that. We're also grateful to Mrs. Yumi Nakamitsu for her report. We would like to also greet the Director General of OPCW, Mr. Fernando Arias. It is great that the leadership of OPCW finally found an opportunity to participate in the meetings of the Council. We think that this format of our interaction should become a regular one. The Syrian chemical dossier is a specific topic, and their first-hand information is irreplaceable. Many delegations have questions about OPCW activities, and frequently very specific questions. So far, Ms. Nakamitsu had to answer these questions, and we are very grateful to her for that. But exhaustive answers on this cannot be provided by the representative of the UN Secretariat. So it would be more logical to put these questions directly to the Director General of PCW and give him an opportunity to answer them in an open format. We are convinced that it is in the interest of the Council to have maximum transparency here, and we hope that this is in the interest of the OPCW as well. We expect that this kind of open interactive exchange is exactly what we're going to have today. In December last year, we put to Mr. Arias a number of questions having to do with the line that OPCW has taken as regards the Syrian chemical file. Members of the Council have the list, so I'm not going to repeat them, but let me just dwell on some salient points. First of all, and of course I'm referring to the infamous FFM report on the Duma incident in April 2018. As confirmed by various sources, including former OPCW inspectors who participated directly in the investigation. According to them, the final version was massively redacted compared to the initial one, and this was done under the pressure from some delegations. In other words, what we're dealing with here is fraud. The attempts by these inspectors to make sure that the leadership of OPCW investigates that resulted in nothing. More than that, they were prosecuted for trying to get to the bottom of this. Today's statement by Mr. Arias makes me return to that. Mr. Arias is saying that not one of the 193 members of the UN questioned the conclusions of the Duma report. Well, that's inaccurate. We brought this into question. We weren't the only ones. Director General, sir, you mentioned many times, including today, that most of the investigation of Duma was carried out after the inspectors who disagreed with that were no longer participating in that. For example, on 6 February 2020, you said, and I quote,
In the last 6 months of the FFM investigation, when most of the analytical work took place.
Furthermore, you saying that some of the inspectors, especially one in Duma, played no role in investigation. This is factually not true and can also be borne out by the documents we have. On the 15th of April, a Security Council meeting, journalist Aaron Mate showed us documents and showed that most of the work was done during the first months of the investigation, when Inspector Met was a key member of the FFM and was the author of the original version. For example, comparing the original version with the final version, Mate shows that 70% of all of these samples were analyzed during the first months, including 100% of wood samples. Can you explain? What is this specific analytical work was being done by FFM in the last 6 months of its investigation? Perhaps this had to do with changing the original conclusions that inspectors reached. In June 2018, next, FFM approached 4 toxicologists and pharmacologists from NATO who have expertise on chemical weapons. The documentation of that was leaked in WikiLeaks, and it shows that the experts excluded the possibility of chlorine as the reason for the death of victims who were filmed in Duma. This conclusion was in the original version, but was not in the final one. And the final report also excluded the June meeting from the list of the group's activities. Why is it that the final report excluded the conclusions of toxicologies when they stated that chlorine was not the reason for the death of the victims we were shown? The final report does have a reference to a later meeting with toxicologies in September and October, and they are included in the list of meetings. But the final report does not provide any information on the conclusions of the toxicologies, why their conclusions could be helpful in explaining the original conclusions of the original toxicologies. Why is it that the final report does not explain what the toxicologists found? Why is this not compared with the conclusions of the original toxicologists? Why are they not in the report? And I very much hope that you will be able to answer these questions. That was first. Second, the initial declaration made by Syria to the convention, we asked to be explained the difference in approaches to Damascus from other countries who had similar problems, but which did not have to face a storm of criticism, unlike Syria. Third point. The methodology of the work of the Technical Secretariat, which uses information from partial sources, opposition sources to Syrian government, and collects evidence remotely, and then comes up with conclusions of the highly likely variety. This is a direct violation of the convention. The convention states the need to have a proper chain of custody. Furthermore, the former press secretary of OPCW, Mr. Lujan, in 2013, stated that the organization is never going to analyze samples unless they were collected by the organization's own inspectors in the field. So what we have now is a technical secretariat violating its own principles and openly stating these violations reports. My question is, what are the measures to rectify the situation that the leadership of the technical secretariat plans to undertake? Next question. The double standards of the technical secretariat when selecting sources of evidence. The inspection of OPCW are very keen to get hold of any, even weak materials from the white helmets. Whereas when there is evidence of opposition's participation in provocations with chemical weapons provided by professional Syrian authorities or Russian military are being ignored, as well as many confirmations of local witnesses, live witnesses, when they say that these incidents were staged. In particular, this was confirmed yet once again in the FFM report on the incident in 2018 in Aleppo. Distinguished Director General, time is moving on, and the questions to you as a leader of Technical Secretariat are snowballing. The story with the Duma report is not over, far from it. It's coming up with new and new twists. And now what we're witnessing, not just the inspectors themselves or OPCW, but individual experts who are trying to get to the truth of that are being persecuted. It's lamentable that their names are also being tarnished by so-called independent and democratic Western media, such as the BBC. We're still without an answer from OPCW to the appeals launched by public activists, in particular the Courage Foundation. The Courage Foundation is calling for the investigation of many breaches in its work, including when it comes evidence of the fraud in the Duma report. And we do not understand why this is being so selective. Some NGOs, the White Helmets, the Technical Secretariat, actively cooperates with. With others who are asking inconvenient questions, well, they are being turned a blind eye to. Well, you can't be talking about the freedom of speech, transparency, or taking the civil society into account here under these circumstances. Since December last year, new questions arose, and they first of all have to do with the leak that happened on the eve of the voting of the Conference of State Parties on the new report of the IIT of the incident in Sarajeva in February 2018. Not a single violation of investigation methodology has been rectified there. And the report itself says that the IIT never went to the place of the incident. All of the material evidence were collected by the representative, once again by the infamous White Helmets. Half of the evidence of the witnesses, White Helmets, most of them, and they were analyzed by the anonymous experts and research institutions. Well, you can't be talking about impartiality or a chain of custody under these circumstances. As in the case with Duma, it's totally unclear why would Damask use chlorine in Sarajeva and therefore expose itself to international criticism if this was not in any event going to get him any military or any other advantage. IIT refers to the alleged use of Sarajeva of one chlorine cylinder, as a result of which there were minor damage to 12 people, but they were discharged from hospital 2 hours after admission. The group itself states that during that period, there were no offensive activities by the Syrian army in the region. The report also has other glaring discrepancies, such as, for example, the pseudo-witnesses saying that they were low-altitude helicopter flights with no lights. With lights on, apologies, which is unacceptable during a nighttime for an attack helicopter or a cylinder which somehow got half corroded less than 12 hours after hitting the ground. We would like to hear comments from Mr. Arias about these things. The new IIT document has one element which is absolutely beyond the pale. In its item 5.18, it states that one of the most likely reasons for the airstrike with chlorine was revenge for a Russian aircraft Su-25 downed earlier. End of quote. At the same time, the team makes this conclusion with reference to an anonymous military expert. We ask Mr. Arya to explain to us what is a foundation for the Secretariat, who, according to the leadership, is to be involved in strictly technical analysis. Why are they going outside of their mandate and is doing something that is simply a politicized conjecture? Who asked inspectors to include this knowingly false conclusion in the final document? During the April ARIA meeting organized by Russia, the independent reporter, Aaron Mate, put a question to representative of US and UK whether or not they would support investigation of machinations surrounding the FFM report, which is organized by the Scientific Advisory Board of OPCW. No answer to that. But let me remind you that under point D45 of the convention, the responsibility for the board is on the Secretary General of OPCW. So my question to you, Mr. Arias, is this. Are you ready to organize a technical discussion within the framework of Scientific Consultative Board with involving famous inspectors in order to discuss all of the discrepancies surrounding the Duma report? We think that our Western colleagues who advocate transparency and depolitization of OPCW should welcome this. We're all interested in an open and, as was stated by many delegations, technical discussion amongst professionals. If you don't think it's possible to organize such a discussion within the Scientific Advisory Board of OPCW, what other options can you propose to resolve the situation? Are you ready to meet the foreign inspectors and directly discuss with them their concerns? We expect to hear answers to all of these questions within the open part of our meeting today. Distinguished colleagues, I would like to underscore that we're here today not for the purpose of, as is being described by some colleagues, have a cross-examination of the Director General by putting inconvenient questions to him. No, this is collective work to rectify the lamentable situation we now have at OPCW. Open discussion with the leadership of the organization is needed to make sure that the further erosion of its authority doesn't happen and that we do not have yet another humiliating situation which happened in April this year, where at the Conference of State Parties a decision was made to strip a sovereign state in line with the Convention of its right. This was pushed through in violation of Convention norms and long-standing consensus practice. What is heartening is that less than half of OPCW voted for that, and only 6 Western states from the current membership of the Council. The remainder of them were either against or refrained. And this is exactly the position taken by former members of the Council who last year participated in the Syrian chemical dossier discussion. In conclusion, Mr. President, I'd like to say that we, as well as many other responsible members of the convention and as a country at the inception of OPCW, we're worried by the politicized line that is being imposed by Western colleagues on the organization. OPCW needs to be a guardian of chemical non-proliferation regime and should not become an instrument to implement someone's political interest or way of punishing the undesirables. Unfortunately, the risks are becoming more real that Syria will not be the only case, that any state can find itself in a similar situation, then any state will have a chemical leverage used against them. The Security Council has special responsibility to make sure this doesn't happen. We all have to make efforts to make sure that OPCW can implement its mandate and remain an impartial guardian of the chemical non-proliferation regime. And therefore, our discussion with the Director General today, we hope will not be the last one, and will help us move a step closer to this goal. We stand ready to, in all platforms, work to restore the trust of OPCW, strengthen its authority, and defend the foundations of weapons of mass destruction non-proliferation regime. I thank you.